2019 meeting of the Traffic and Parking Advisory Board meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome. The Traffic and Parking Advisory Board reviews items of interest regarding parking and traffic items. We are an advisory board, and our favorable recommendation today goes before the Oshkosh Common Council. The council can either accept or reject any recommendation from this board. If you don't agree with our decision, you can discuss that item with any council member. If the board does not in fact recommend an item, a common council member may sponsor a new ordinance regarding that same item. All items do require 2 readings before the common council. The first reading will take place on Tuesday, November 26th at 6 p.m., and you will be allowed to comment on the item at that time, though the council will take no action. On Tuesday, December 10th at 6 p.m., the item will be on a second reading, at which time the council will in fact take action. You will again be allowed to speak. For this afternoon's meeting, I will read each agenda item, at which time, if you'd like to speak, please step to the podium and give your name and address for the record. I do ask that you keep your comments pertinent to the agenda item. The item will then come back to this board for discussion and ultimately action. Please call the roll.
Peschel.
Here.
Szynski.
Here.
Staple. Absent. Weinschneider.
Here.
Becker.
Here.
Christensen. Absent. Haas.
Here.
All right, that gives us a quorum, which then brings us to the first item on the agenda, which is approval of minutes. Anyone with any comments, questions, additions, or deletions to those minutes? Seeing none, I need a second.
Second.
Anyone? Last call. Seeing none, I will ask you to call the roll for approval of minutes.
Peschel.
Aye.
Szynski.
Aye.
Weinschneider.
Aye.
Becker.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Carried.
Which brings us to the public comment portion of the meeting. I don't believe there's anyone here that's here to comment on a non-agenda item. So with the board's indulgence, we'll move right to new business. First item being, number 1, a request for no parking, stopping, standing, waiting, bus loading zone on Eagle Street, west side, from 420 feet south of Taft Avenue to Southland Avenue between 7 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. on school days. The current condition, no parking, stopping, standing, waiting, bus loading zone west side from 590 feet south of Taft Ave to Southland Avenue between 7 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. on school days.
Okay, this is a request from the Oshkosh Area School District and the Oshkosh West Administration. So basically, right now they have a bus loading zone which goes from like this sign all the way to Southland, and what they're asking is that this area, right here, from basically, here we go. From where this sign is, all the way to Southland be a bus loading zone. So right now, this area from this sign to this sign here is currently unrestricted parking. And they're asking for that so that when there's events at the Kimball Auditorium here, they can use that for bus loading and unloading. And then it would also allow them for a safer and more efficient removal of snow. I know that the band trailer was sometimes parked here, but they said they were going to make alternative arrangements for that. So I know Jim's here from the school district. If you have any questions or if he wants to explain any further.
This would be your opportunity.
Okay. I'm Jim Fox, the Director of Buildings and Grounds for Oshkosh Area Schools, representing West High School. My office address is 1404 South Main Street. Clarification, I think, from what I had heard is at the south east corner of the Kimball Auditorium that you can just see there already is signage from there until about 200 feet short of Southland is currently signed as no stopping, standing, waiting, bus parking. That correct?
Right, there's that sign there, I believe. Yep.
Right. So we don't want to change that, the way that is signed. From there towards Southland, that is all no parking currently in front of entrance 38, and that works out wonderfully. What we would like to change is the area that you're looking at right next to the Kimball Auditorium. From that particular sign that you just pointed to toward the first sign that Jim had indicated, which is no parking, and that is no parking from the sign to the exit of the parking lot, which for safety makes sense. So we're looking just in that area between the two signs. That is where we'd like to, would like to park buses during the day, should they have a daytime event, a play, a musical, whatever. Currently, that is unregulated parking, so the buses do have to travel further down the street to park to facilitate students getting in and out of the Kimball. Plus, with the proximity of the cars and that sidewalk, snow does accumulate. It's very difficult to get snow out of that particular area with the way it blows off the roof and the way the plows have to come through. So we have had a couple of vehicles get damaged in that area. What we would like to do is, from the no parking sign that Jim had pointed to next to the exit for the parking lot, just extend that exact same signage as no stopping, standing, waiting, bus loading zone, which is consistent with the rest of the west side of the road. Just start at that particular sign that you're seeing now, extend it along Kimball, and continue to the south where it is currently signed. I believe the remainder of the block, the last couple hundred feet, is unregulated parking, which is fine, as is the east side of the street, which is fine as well.
You. Does anyone have any questions?
I guess.
Before we talk, Bob, I need a
sorry.
second from the
Thank you.
board.
Thank you.
All right. Someone? Second?
Second, sorry.
Now you can speak, Bob.
All right. So just, because Jim just got up and said that he was initiating a clarification, I'm just wondering if what Jim's asking for is clearly stated in the wording here, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, this is 420 feet, so we're going to 590, which I measured to be at this sign.
Okay,
So it's about an extra, what, 100?
150,
Yeah. Do the quick math there.
okay.
Is this intended to take place ASAP, given Kimball's utilization goes up substantially, I would think, over Christmas time?
It does. The earlier the better for the school system. Correct.
We still able to get signs in the ground?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, we can even do it in January, really, honestly, but unless, like last winter, when I had that polar vortex, we had some issues, but other than that, yeah, you can get them
anyone else with a comment, question?
in. And honestly, we don't have to drive another sign. We'll just change the sign on this post. So where it's no parking here, we'll just make this, this sign to match this one here.
Don't we run into the problem of someone parking
In the driveway?
between the driveway and the sign?
No, what we'll probably do, we'll probably just add another sign on this post, honestly.
Point an arrow in both directions?
But no, the other way. So we'll put bus loading zone this way and then no parking that way.
Oh, okay, well, same, yeah. Seeing no comments, questions, please call the roll on agenda 1.
Heschel.
Aye,
Szynski.
Aye.
Wunschneider.
Aye.
Becker.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Carried 5-0.
Agenda 2, a request for no parking on Marion Road south and west sides from Pearl Ave to Jackson Street, and no parking north and east side from 238 feet south of Pearl Ave to 1,350 feet west of Jackson Street, and 4-hour parking north side from 565 feet west of Jackson Street to 1,350 feet west of Jackson Street. No parking north side from Jackson Street to 565 feet west. Current condition, no parking west side from Pearl Ave to 1,550 feet west of Jackson Street. No parking south side from Jackson Street to 565 feet west of Jackson Street. No parking east side from 238 feet south of Pearl Avenue to Jackson Street. 2-hour parking east side from Pearl Avenue to 238 feet south between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. 4-hour parking south side from 565 feet west of Jackson Street to 1,550 feet west of Jackson Street.
All right, I'll try to simplify this. The best thing
Please
probably
do.
is to look at this map that's in your packet. But the issue is, we have a citizen request that we look at moving basically there's 4-hour parking on this side of the road. There's no parking up towards from Jackson's on this end, I mean, Jackson Street, there's a median, so there's no parking obviously in that area. And then when we get to the west side here, just where, where the road bends up here, there's a little bit of 2-hour parking down this way. So there's 2-hour parking down here, then there's no parking around the curve. And then there's no parking on the other end of it. However, what the issue is in the citizen request is there's currently 4-hour parking for the majority stretch of this would be the south side of the road, and then there's no parking on the north side. And I think what the initial intention was that there be parking allowed on one side of the road in the middle stretch here. At the time, I think these ordinances got put into place right before I started, so a little over 6 years ago. But I think at the time, the issue was, there was a thought maybe there would be some need for on-street parking for the Rivers 1, which was the only building there at that time. There was nothing over here except for that dilapidated factory. So I think the thinking was that parking would be closer for visitors of the Rivers on this side of the street, and that's why it ended up on that side of the street. However, now what the citizen is requesting is that with the annex here, there's a lot more demand for on-street parking, it seems like, it must be the tenants running in and out of the building for less than 4 hours. And there's also, she's stating some issues with parking near the fire hydrant and then also near the driveways to the Rivers 1 and 2. So she was requesting that the parking be moved from the south side to the north side, is basically what the request is in a nutshell.
This section doesn't have parking on both sides any longer, does it? Or?
No. This was just during the construction that we allowed parking on both sides while the building was being, actually it was while their parking lot was being constructed. But now there's only parking allowed on the south side, 4-hour parking, which still I think makes sense. They have a nice big parking lot for the annex, and the Rivers has underground parking. So this is mainly intended, the 4-hour parking, to be like visitor parking, more or less. And Marion Road's 36 feet wide. Based on that, parking's warranted on at least one side of the street.
Are we able to discuss, or we?
Actually, I'm going to invite, there's 3 people sitting back there that
Got it.
want to speak. So whoever wants to go first, step to the podium, name and address for the record.
Catherine Labes, Laabs, 455 Marion Road, apartment 106. I'm here to talk about the section of Marion Road where the annex property is on the north and both Rivers properties on the south. Parking is on the south side, 4 hours only. This area has 3 driveways, 2 fire hydrants, and a bus stop. Students use this parking for over 4 hours, block in the fire hydrants and the bus stop, and are parking too tight to the driveways, making it dangerous to see oncoming traffic. The 2 fire hydrants get parked in front of even when there is open space to not block them. When the snow comes, the plows have to swing around the vehicles, leaving the hydrants in deep snow. Students get into their vehicles and will do illegal U-turns to go west on Marion Road when they leave. Vehicles will be parked for days and many tickets on and not moved. The police have given out many tickets on these violations. This problem will be a continued issue as student turnover is high at the annex property. Please consider moving 4-hour parking between the 2 driveways of the annex, as more vehicles can be parked along there with no parking on the south side of Marion Road, leaving the south side of Marion Road open for the fire department to easily get to the fire hydrants if they ever have to be called on in the future. Vehicles are also parked in the no parking areas on both sides of Marion Road for overnight and through weekends. The UW system needs to fix the loss of student parking when they made the sports fields, forcing the city of Oshkosh streets to take on more vehicles for parking. All student resident buildings should have made a point to have enough parking for all students in the building on their property to keep vehicles off the streets as much as possible. Thank you.
Anyone else that wants to speak to Agenda 2? I'm going to ask for a second from the board so that we can discuss.
Second.
Anyone, Mr. Peschel? You
Sure.
go ahead.
So from what I'm gathering, what you're asking us to do or to look over is to move parking that's on the right side of the screen and make it only to be on the left side.
Right.
So,
Yep.
and so that would free up, the, what would we call that, the north side, south side?
Yeah, so it's kind of confusing. That's actually why all this
Yeah.
wording's really confusing, because you have basically the streets go on east,
Sure.
it's going north and south, and then it turns to go north and south. That's why it's confusing.
Yeah,
But-
it's like they should have named that one stretch something else.
Yeah, but that's what her request is,
Okay.
and I think it makes some sense, like she said, because the fire hydrants, the driveways, and the bus stop are all on this south side of the street, which I think, like I said, when this ordinance was actually first put in, I don't even know if there were any buildings here. It was before my time, but I think the Rivers One was being built right around when I started, so I'm sure that's what their thought was probably.
So the parking that's taking place on the street now, was that not accounted for when they were developing the annex?
I think, and I'm not involved too much with the planning and zoning, but they have a huge parking lot back here, and from what I understand, they have sufficient parking for their residents. But what I think happens is, this is just my assumption, is that if students live on this side of the building and it's closer for them to park here and run in real quick,
Sure.
if they're gonna be there for a short time, that's what they're
Okay.
doing. And/or they have friends over and they're, I don't know if they have visitor parking in there or not, I guess, honestly. But I'm assuming it's closer for them to park here and run in and out than it is to park on the other side, and/or if they have visitors. And I don't know if, Lieutenant Harris, if you have any thoughts on that. I don't know if you've been out in that area at all, or.
I mean, yeah, I haven't observed that area, but it's a good assumption that I guess you have there, the shortest path.
Sure.
people might take.
Well, and, it kind of speaks to the difference of clients that kind of live on that street. I mean, one side's kind of students, so to say, and the other side is either seniors or it's, young business professionals that live in the Anthem building towards the end there. Which we don't necessarily have that level of parking concern further down towards past the rivers there as well, so.
Yeah, it seems like, I've tried to observe there over the last month or so, and it does, and I've driven down there quite a bit because we have the bus stop there, but it seems like the rivers have adequate underground parking, where they don't really see too much parking on street, and the visitors seem to be able to park in their visitor lot there. So I didn't really see a whole lot of on-street parking here, but I think that her observation is correct, that since the annex was built there are, generally when I drive down there now, there's probably about 5 to 6 cars that are parked on the street here. Today I think there was 6.
Yep, and I did drive through last week in preparation for the meeting, and there was around, right close to that bend on that far end there, this part over here is where I saw a lot more parking. And even at that time, I observed parking that would have been well within 10 feet of the fire hydrant, so, which I think is the ordinance, so. So I guess I would say that if, moving everything to the other side of the street reduces congestion on that side, increases public safety, there should be no concern with that.
Yeah, I think actually, and the tenants of the annex would probably like it better because they're
Sure.
closer, I would assume. And I don't know, the representatives from Mercury, and you guys don't have a problem with it either, so I think.
And everyone that you guys utilize that comes into your property utilizes on-site parking, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so, and it's secure parking as well, so.
The second building that I live in of the Rivers only has 24 stalls for underground parking. So like myself, many of us have to park our cars in the parking area. But then we do get students that don't want those tickets and will pull
They'll
into
park
our
on it.
parking also.
Anyone else? All right, seeing no further discussion or questions, I'm going to ask that the roll be called on Agenda 2.
Heschel.
Aye.
Kaczynski.
Aye.
Von Schneider.
Aye.
Becker.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Carried 5-0.
Agenda 3, a request for a two-way or four-way stop at the intersection of West 10th and Minnesota. Current condition, Minnesota Street yields to West 10th Avenue.
All right, so this is a continuation from last month's meeting. As you recall, last month we had the request and we implemented the four-way stop at 11th in Minnesota, which seems to have helped in that area. But I know the board and the superintendent from the school district had asked last meeting also if we could look at this 10th in Minnesota, and there was some support from the police department as well. So this area, I would say, so the request is to convert that yield sign on Minnesota to a two or four-way stop. So I've done some observations out here as well. It's definitely not as congested or as busy as 11th is. However, it is a school crossing, as you can see here. They have a couple of, I was out there in the morning, they have a couple students that are crossing, I don't know what you call them, but the student safety patrol or whatever that help kids cross here. So they were doing a so-so job of helping kids cross, and then a teacher also then joined them, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes before school started. But anyway, there was probably that day maybe 12 to 15 students that walked to school crossing in this area, whereas at the intersection of 11th, there's probably 50 to 70. I mean, it's not as busy. However, I can see the point there. I know when the police department were out there, they said they observed traffic that wasn't sufficiently slowing there for the crosswalk. I don't think this one's quite as congested or as concerning as 11th. I mean, there's some merit to making that a stop intersection. That one, so again, I looked at the warrants of crashes. The past 3 years, there was only one crash, and that was, I think I mentioned last meeting, there was a semi that took a turn too tight and backed into a car. That was back when I think they were going to like All Rose Steel or something down there and must have somehow got on the wrong road. Other than that, there hasn't been a lot of crash history. I didn't do the traffic counts here, but they're obviously, I can deduct that they're going to be similar to 11th in Minnesota. So it's not going to meet the traffic warrant. But you could consider the warrant for high pedestrian volumes at a location with limited ability to see oncoming traffic. Because before and after school, there are a lot of vehicles parked. Both the teachers seem to park in this area on 10th. So based on that warrant, we could justify a two or four-way stop. So I think converting it to a two-way stop makes sense and would help manage the traffic pedestrian conflicts better. Granted, it's mostly before and after school, but that is where the majority of the traffic is happening, and that's where the majority of the activity is. If the board wanted to entertain a four-way stop, I wouldn't have too much concern with that. I think a two-way would help. I mean, a four-way would obviously be the next step. I'm not sure if that's needed or not based on the volume of traffic the rest of the day. However, that's something we could consider as well.
Need a second?
Second.
Are we going with the two or the four-way?
Well, I was
We're gonna
going to get to
discuss
that in a
it.
second.
We're gonna discuss that
Um,
out.
My preference would be to take the small incremental step and go with a two-way, swap the yields for stops. We certainly have the option to implement a four-way stop should we find that the two-way is insufficient. Per Jim's point, there's not nearly as many kids traversing that intersection as is the case a block down. So the only real concern, and I don't think it's going to be one, any idea how many cars? You said you didn't do a traffic count, but just food for thought, are we going to have a queuing problem potentially if there's kids in that crosswalk on Minnesota back to 10th? Probably not, but
No, from what I've seen, no, it's because there's a number of the vehicles are coming from the south. Actually, I would say from what I've observed, probably the majority of the vehicles were coming from the south that were dropping off and picking up their kids. That's what really congests the area up here at 11th in Minnesota.
right.
It's more limited in this area. More so what I saw is kids from this direction, from I guess that would be the west, tend to use this intersection. That's probably where most of the concern is that, and if we do convert this to a stop, then that would allow these kids to, sufficiently cross here. There's more traffic on Minnesota than on 10th. It was mostly just teachers parking on.
Right. What I'm suggesting is
Yeah.
that the people headed northbound on Minnesota,
Right.
and whether they should do it or not, a lot of people dump and run their kids, which means they stop where they shouldn't and let the
Yeah.
kids pile out. So if someone does that, you may have a queuing problem, since they theoretically then have to stop again.
Right.
Again, whether they do or not is another conversation.
Yeah.
So I think there's enough queuing distance there, even with pick-up and drop-off. I mean, I get to see that firsthand every day
Yep.
at different schools, but I think it's still worth the incremental step of making it a two-way as opposed to a four-way. It's just my 2 cents, but anyone else want to weigh in on two-way versus four-way?
I'd like to consider another thought. Going through there a few times during the drop-off pickup situation, it's pretty congested, and field of vision is very restricted. And when you got 2 lanes of traffic back and forth, I think to use Merrill Elementary as an example of creating one-ways on northbound, southbound, at least everybody's going the same way, whether they're dropping off or picking up. And it works a whole lot better, and it's a smoother transition for drop-off or picking up. It was very difficult to get through there. Somebody coming in, you gotta wait at the intersection until they clear, and then you can go back and finish your trip. And so I just bring that up as a thought that should be looked at.
One-way streets? Or is that what you're saying?
Just like at Merrill, you got 2 streets that are one way each direction, and it makes it for very organized drop-off and pickup, and a lot safer, because you got a larger field of view. And that's a notorious, or let's just put it this way, drop-off and pickup has become quite popular.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there are very few students walking or biking to school from what I saw. But the issue with that is that's a larger issue that, the church and the residents would probably have some feelings about that, because then you're basically making it a one-way for, those 20 minutes before and after school, which is gonna inconvenience obviously the church and the residents in that area. So I'm sure that they would, have some feedback with that, as well as that's also then whenever we consider, there's always plus and minuses to one-ways, and then it becomes into public safety as well, and they'd have to evaluate where their routes are, to get to the houses and the schools and things like that.
Oh, yeah, there's
But-
always neighborhood adjustments
Yeah.
to
That,
that, yes.
yeah. That would be a major change, I guess, is what
Oh,
I'm
yes,
saying.
absolutely. I was just saying, comparing Merrill and how much easier it is with the one-way on either side of the
Mhm.
Well, it'd be the same with Jefferson idea. Just the food for thought.
Anyone else?
I think I can go along with the, with converting the yield signs to stop signs. So from what I think I understand you're saying is that the majority of traffic is gonna be the north to south direction, is what.
That's what it
is-
seems like to
that's what-
me.
That's what it seems like to you.
Other than on 11th, there's more east-west.
Sure. And that's a wider street too, isn't it, as
Uh,
well?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
So, it looks like it's a wider street. But I don't have a concern with it. The challenge that I would have with making it a one-way, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, it's just that I don't know that the neighborhood is set up that way. If we were to compare Merrill to the Jefferson neighborhood, Merrill is got, you know, that busy street of New York, and then has those one-ways that go the opposite directions up to, I think it's Nevada. And that part of Nevada is more of a residential area. So, I mean, there might be some similarities to it, but it just seems like in Merrill, that works really well because it's kind of blockaded in
It's an
that
island.
neighborhood.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, here you're close to two busy streets, Ninth and Main.
Yep. So,
Anyone else?
I agree with what you were saying about it, like, go with the two-way, and we can always bump it up if
Make a-
need be.
That'll change if we have to. Hearing and seeing nothing else, I'm going to ask that the roll be called on Agenda 3.
This will be on a two-way, or, do we need to make?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. Sorry, thanks for keeping me honest.
I'd like to make a motion for the two-way. Change the
two-way
yields
option.
to stop.
Amend 3 to include a two-way. Am I accurately summarizing?
Well, it was kind of on the table between two and
Well, right.
four-way, so
So,
I'd like to drop the four-way.
okay, so striking
Just cross out the four.
four-way, or actually four, or four, to be brutally honest or distinct.
Two-way.
No, you would have to strike or four, which then would leave it reading a request for a two-way stop intersection. All clear?
yes.
Okay. So,
So I'd like to make a motion to delete the wording "or for" out of the amendment, or out of the proposal.
second on the amendment.
Second.
Anyone have any discussion about the amendment? Call the roll on the amendment.
Peschel.
Aye.
Krasinski.
Aye.
Wunschneider.
Aye.
Becker.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Carried, 5-0.
Which then leaves us with the now newly amended motion, or resolution, for a two-way stop at the aforementioned 10th and Minnesota.
Second.
Call the roll on the newly amended resolution.
Peschel.
Aye.
Krasinski.
Aye.
Wunschneider.
Aye.
Becker.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Carried, 5-0.
Which brings us to staff statements. Mr. Collins.
Great, we just got a couple. Oregon Street, as you know, is fully open. It's been open now for a couple of weeks. So it's good that we got that project completed. The Convention Center North CP parking lot, that reopened on Thursday night. So that project's complete, other than, they gotta do a little restoration in one of the corners by the fire station, but that's pretty minor. So that project is complete, other than they had to do temporary striping because it was too cold to complete the striping, so, what's there now is temporary until they can come back in the spring and finish the striping of the stalls. So what I've seen looks good so far. So that one is reopened. Hazel Street actually just completed, so that'll be fully open, I believe, tomorrow. They just gotta finish installing some permanent stop signs that, have to wait for the locate to clear, which should be tomorrow afternoon. And then that'll be complete. Then the only other thing is the Oshkosh, reminding everybody, the Oshkosh Congress Avenue Bridge is gonna close for about 6 months, starting in January. They had that short-term closure, just last month, and the more we can get the word out there about that, the better. Hopefully people will find some alternative routes, because it was kind of ironic. I don't think, some people called in from various traffic complaints, but they were all related to the bridge being closed. So I'm thinking when it's closed for 6 months that, maybe people will find some different routes, and that'll limit the number of issues we have. Johnson Street gets a lot busier, obviously, which causes some issues with the traffic lights, especially with those short intersections between Pearl and Algoma. So that backs up a little bit when you get that much traffic there, but it's due to the bridge being closed. The rest of the year it functions pretty well. As well as get some calls about traffic in the campus area, but again, it's because everybody's going down High in Algoma because they can't get over the bridge, so they're taking alternative routes. Same thing for traffic on Algoma in front of the schools, obviously was busier as well. So, but I'm thinking with the 6 months, people will start adjusting, and hopefully that'll alleviate some of those issues. But again, there'll be heavier traffic on Wisconsin, obviously.
Anyone with agenda items for future meetings? Being none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.